Hey friend, in today's watercolor tutorial, we're going to be painting this misty pine landscape inspired by the Pacific Northwest. Without further ado, let's get painting. In today's video, I'm just going to be using one color, Perylene Green by Winsor Newton, along with my size 16 and size 2 round Princeton brush, and the paper I've taped down that I'm painting on is a size 5 by 7 inches. To get started, I simply want to do a wash of water just in the first couple of inches, just to start our little bit of fog up in our sky. And I'm just going to take a hint of Perylene Green and just add it in this right corner, maybe just a touch in this left corner as well. But I just want a faint hint of color, but not anything too overboard. All right, I'm just gonna allow this sky to set and dry, and when we come back, we will start our first layer of misty pine trees. Now that our misty, foggy sky is dry, I'm just gonna take my size 16 brush here and do a wash of water just about an inch or so above, starting towards the left side of the page, and it's gonna angle slightly downward. And I will just add a decent amount of water almost all the way down to the bottom of the page here. And then I'm just going to take my size 2 brush and I want to start to lay out some shading and some fog along this top line where our water is. And I'm just gonna buff out the fog using this brush just to bleed out slightly. And you can even add some more water if necessary. And I'm just doing this kind of circular motion just to get an irregular quality to the fog. And then from here, I want to start to lay out my pine trees. And with the pine trees, I like to lay out the trunks of my trees first, and I like to make sure I have a variety of height with the trees. And here I'm just slightly laying these out all along this water line. And then from here, I just want to lightly buff out some of that dark green so there's no harsh lines from the trunks. And then from here, I'm simply just going to mimic kind of a cone shape. If you've taken any of my tutorials before on here, you'll know I like to refer to my pine trees as kind of a really loose cone shaped silhouette. Not all pine trees will be like that, of course, but just a loose cone shape, meaning the top is thin and it gradually gets wider towards the bottom. And there's just loose texture on either side of the trunk. And I like to kind of give variety with the different levels of fog, so I may bring some dark green down more than other parts of this area, but I'm just gonna work my way across here and add our pine trees. And some, again, are gonna be more full than others. Some may just have a few branches and are less filled, just like this one here. You can allow some white to pop through as well, so long as you kind of have an elongated point and then some texture on either side. You are definitely going to see a nice little forest form. This one here is just more of a fuller tree, just like so. And then as I work my way across the line, I make sure to just drag my brush a bit just to buff out some of the greenery. And as we work our way across, our paper might dry a little bit. If that does happen, or when it does happen, you can simply add just a little bit more water as a wash, then add in a touch more green just to fill in the shaded area of the fog just below the trees, and you'll still be golden and your misty trees will touch the water line and continue to bleed and fog out. I'm now just going to finish these pine trees in the line here, and then we will let that dry and move on to our next line of pine trees. In order to help this bleed out a little bit and create a more misty effect, I'm simply just going to add some more water just below. And from here, I am just going to tap lightly some of this fog and some of this Perylene Green just to help it kind of bleed out a bit more. And then I'm just going to do a few little taps of texture on this lighter area here. I'm just going to add a touch more of Perylene Green at the base. And then I'm just kind of doing a circular motion just to help blend it out a bit more. And then I'm simply just going to allow this area to dry, and then we will move on to our next layer of misty pine trees. Next, I'm just going to repeat that similar process of doing the wash of water. This time though, my angle, instead of going left to right downward, we're going to go right to left and slope a little bit downward at an angle. And then I will just go ahead and apply plenty of water. And from here, I'm going to add my second layer of trees. Now I'm just going to take my size 16 brush and just slightly smooth out some of the fog. And from here, I will just let this area dry and we'll move on to the next layer. This next layer of pine trees is going to be a little bit more misty, and they'll be more, I would say, fogged out, so not as detailed, but just more subtle than the previous pine trees. So I'm gonna saturate just about 1.5 inches or so down below this second layer of pine trees, and then all the way down I'm gonna apply some water. And I'm gonna do these pine trees just angled downward, just like so, kind of similar to the second layer. And now I'm gonna switch gears to my size 2 brush. And I want these pine trees to be very just loose and subtle. And I'm simply just going to add just a little bit of fog here. Then I'm going to take my size 2 brush and just lightly buff out, or even my finger, just buff out that water line that we just applied. So to start, because the paper is so wet, I'm really just going to spread out some of this pigment just to create a really subtle fog. And now that that has settled just a little bit, I'm going to do just a few kind of taps with my brush with our Perylene Green. And I am going to go a little bit higher and kind of meet just above the water line. And as I get just above the water line, I'll have just the tippy top of the trees be less loose and watery. And I'm just going to help define that top third of the tree slightly, just in a toned down version of the trees. Now I just want to add a touch more of the Perylene Green just to get this a little bit darker. Then from here, I'm just going to do a few dash lines just vertically with my brush. Just adding some subtle, dainty texture here. And then I'm just going to blend out a little bit more of the Perylene Green. And next, I want to do a few more just misty trees here. But this time, now that the water is settled, just for a couple more minutes, it's not going to spread out as vivid as the ones above. I'll do a couple off towards the left as well. Maybe this one will have more of a detailed point. And this layer is almost straight instead of angled. Now, to make these look more like trees and not so much like just foggy lines, I'm just gonna increase the base width using some more concentrated amount of Perylene Green. And then I will just slightly buff out the base just a little bit. Then from here, I'm just going to do a few more misty trees on the left. I just want to add maybe a little bit more concentrated Perylene Green for these trees as well. Once the water and the paper start to lift the color a little bit as it dries, you can always just kind of take a step back to look to see if you want to add just a touch more paint. Alrighty, now for our last layer towards the bottom, I'm just going to do a layer sloping from the left to the right, and it's going to slope downward towards the right. And I'm just going to do just about starting, I would say 1 inch, and then it goes down to 1/2 inch for the bottom right corner. And from here, I'm just slowly going to start adding some misty trees. And it's okay if some of these are loose and watery because of some of the water drying above. Gonna just start to lay out where I want my trees to be. And using some of the remaining Perylene Green on my brush here, I'm just going to buff out some of this fog. And now I can just start to add some details to our misty trees for this bottom layer. So with the Misty Pine landscapes, depending on how much water you've laid out and the timing of the way it dries, your layout may look a little bit different, especially in this bottom half, because we're kind of playing with more wet and wet technique in this particular bottom half versus the top half. It has some of the wet and wet, but also some wet and dry as well. So definitely just kind of let loose, get into the creative flow state as you get into this bottom half, experimenting with some of the misty, really muted, fogged out trees and the ones that are maybe partially fogged out and partially concentrated. It's nice to get kind of a organic variety of the different misty trees. And to finish off this landscape, one of my favorite things to do with a misty pine landscape is to add a few flying birds. It just kind of captures your eye. And so I want to do a few birds tucked in right here and maybe a couple or so up in this right corner. And in a nutshell, I like to have different birds kind of laid out in different like stages of flying, if that makes sense, or different positions, I should say. The most basic one would be kind of like a flat, almost a flat V shape, like a V letter, but like someone sat on the V letter and there's just a little divot at the bottom. It's the only way I can describe it. I have very unique analogies if you've taken any more of my videos before. So here's one variation. I'm now going to do a really dainty one that's more of like the letter V. Just like so, and it's kind of farther in view. I'm using super light pressure with a good concentrated amount of Perylene Green, so that way it looks almost black. Let's see, the next position I would like to do would be one that's almost flat, but like a reverse of this V shape. So I'm gonna have the wings be pointed downward. Just like so. And then right in the center, like left center area, I'm gonna do just a little divot. Just like so. Another bird flying pose I'm going to do is one that's almost vertical. So I'm going to do a reverse kind of C curve that's really dainty, and then a second C curve. And then the bird's body is just going to be right in the center. And then I just want to do a couple more V-shaped birds. I may elongate this one here just a hair bit. And honestly, on second thought, this bird is not quite doing it for me. And that's okay, that happens. So all I'm gonna do to erase that, which this is actually a good technique to show regardless, is take a slightly damp brush here, and I'm just gonna buff it out with a little bit of pressure with the tip of my brush. And now that bird is lost in the mist. Okay, I feel better now. Alrighty, so I'm just gonna do a couple more birds. I think it's good to have an odd number of birds, so that way there's just a little bit of irregular organic flow to the positions of the birds, in addition to, I think the odd numbers just have a lot more balance. So I'm gonna do another one here. Maybe this one, the wings are flapped down. And then I'm just gonna finish it off with a couple more dainty birds off in the distance. Maybe just one tuck down below. Alrighty, I will not go too crazy with the birds because it's easy to do that. I believe I have 9, so we hit an odd number. I will keep it at that. I hope that you enjoyed this watercolor Misty Pine landscape tutorial. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss any further watercolor tutorials. And be sure to check me out on Instagram at Kendra VanDruff and tag me if you post your work. I would love to see your paintings for my tutorials.